Ho, 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 ho.
Hey everyone, and welcome back, Rumcasters. It's another episode of the Rumcast coming at you, and 'tis the season to be jolly, as they say. It's been a long year, and it's been an interesting year, but we're all happy to see it through in December. Will, how's it going over there, and how's your December so far?
I'm good. I'm hoping that with that intro, you're going to throw in like some sleigh bells or something, kind of like jingling in the background.
Well,
I think
I
that
was
would
already on it, man. I was
maybe
already
like
getting the samples. Yeah.
a distant ho 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 from Santa. That would be great. I'm doing great. It's a beautiful Saturday here in Nashville. Sunny skies, temperatures
Nice.
in the 50s.
Wow.
Perfect day to put on a sweatshirt, go for a walk, as I did earlier. But it's also the perfect day to enjoy rum-themed gifts given to you by loved ones, as I have been doing. I'm lucky to have a very cool mother-in-law. My wife's mother, Megan, gifted me a rum advent calendar, which is one of those things that, as a rum fan, I'd seen people post about them in previous years around the holiday season, and always been like, oh, I bet that would be fun. And but I probably wasn't going to go out and get one myself. And there was a knock at the door the other day and a package left behind, and lo and behold, it was a rum advent calendar sent from my mother-in-law. So shout out to her for doing that. And I've been going. It's really fun because it's not like every single sample that's included in it is something that is just knocking me off my socks.
Right.
There is some good stuff in there, but it's fun as just kind of an exercise. It's a way to encounter rums that I haven't had in several years that I'm not likely to buy again, and it's kind of fun to revisit them and just see what stands out to me about them now versus maybe when I had them a long time ago. So
well, how big is it? Because I've seen there's like 12 advent calendars. There's 24.
It's 20. It's 25 or 24, whichever one is
it.
like the common for advent calendars. So it's been.
Yeah.
I loved having. When I was a kid, I had the chocolate advent calendars, and I absolutely loved having those. But I don't remember the traditional number of days. But it's either 24 or 25. And it's been really fun working my way through that. And, you know me, I don't typically do a lot of like ratings and stuff like that. Like I like to compare stuff, but I don't like, do a scoring system or anything like that. Yeah. But I have decided that as I go through this calendar, I'm doing kind of a power rankings.
That's awesome.
Of just, as I try these different samples, I'm going to just rearrange them in order based on enjoyment and see what I'm left with at the end of it. And, maybe when I get to the end, we can run through that at some point. But, so that's been what I've been doing over here. What about you? Are you kind of getting in the holiday spirit, making lists of gifts to give to your loved ones? Where are you right now?
And checking them twice. Yes. So I mean, we just started getting our holiday decorations out, and been talking to Melissa about the advent calendar after you sent me the picture. My wife Melissa, and I'm told there may be something also coming my way for an advent, but I think it's like the 12 days of rum type of deal, which is why I asked you that.
I was wondering if you're going to be in a scenario where you're going to be like pounding 2 samples a day, just try to like play advent catch up, which would be kind of fun. I actually started mine a little bit early just because I try not to have alcohol every single day of the week. I tried to spread it out a little bit, and so I didn't want to have to have something 20, 24, 25 days in a row. So I started a little bit early to give myself a buffer. I'll also probably have some days where I have like 2 samples, But so I'm doing like a non-traditional advent approach, trying to be health conscious as I go through this.
Yeah, you could still open a door on the calendar each day and see what it is, and not have to necessarily sample it.
And I totally do that. Yeah, I totally do that. As soon as I finish one, I open the next one just to see what the next sample is going to be. So yeah.
So you mentioned what other kind of rum gifts and things, and I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about what are good things. Melissa had asked me what are things that I'm looking for maybe that might be cool and helpful rum related stuff. And
I think we all get those questions. If you're a big enough rum fan to where everyone knows that you love rum in your life, they start asking you.
They're like, what do you want? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I always struggle with what to tell people.
Yeah, which is why I was thinking, maybe we give a few ideas of what we're looking for, and maybe that would be helpful to more than just you and me.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm curious to see what is going to be on your list of a couple of items, and I've got a couple ideas that I think are pretty cool. So
yeah, I'm usually really bad at telling people gift ideas for myself, but I think I've come up with a couple that are good and relatable for other people.
Yeah,
I'm interested to hear yours as well. So what have you got over there? What's your first one?
Yeah, I'll start it off. So the first one is kind of, and to your point, kind of what I think would be really cool for people, but also cool for myself. So I've kind of done.
Are you dropping a hint? Are you like, is this a subtle hint to listeners?
No, not to listeners. No, no, I meant for maybe my wife or my loved ones who may listen in, that maybe they'll find something they could get for me here.
Oh, your family listens to this?
Some of them do. Yeah, they do, and I have friends also that are local friends that listen as well. So we're big in Miami. Will, you didn't know?
Yeah, I hope next time I land in the Miami airport, there's like a little throng of people waiting for me there.
Of course, and they're gonna have the little placard that says your last name on it, and like to take you. Of course, it'll be arranged. All right. So, anyways, the first one I had was an interesting one because it's actually a Kickstarter project. So it would have to be somebody that would understand this wouldn't be something you would get right away because it's a Kickstarter project, and I think it's due in like June or something. But
oh wow!
So what it is, and I just kind of happened upon this by chance actually. But what it is it's on Kickstarter. It's called Spirits Flight Palate Development Tool for Whiskey, which is a really interesting long name. But I'll tell you what it essentially is a kit where you can do blind flights with for spirits. And so it brings with it four, similar to like small Glencairn glasses, but they're all labeled A, B, C, and D already in the glass. So it's kind of etched in on the bottom. And then it comes with these four rings that are also A, B, C, and D that would just fit around the bottle.
Oh, so you can match them.
Exactly. So what you could do is, you could have a friend, a partner, whoever would set this up for you by just pouring these 3 or 4 whiskeys in and then just putting those rings around the bottles and putting them somewhere. So when you're ready, you go back and you'll see, oh, this one was that one. And it kind of just allows you to do that a little bit easier than like I've done it in the past where I like write it on napkins or something. Right. So
I've done all sorts of weird stuff to try to like remember which one is associated with which bottle.
Right, and
that's interesting.
You're like taping the A, B, C, or D, or you're like putting it on a piece of paper that's A, B, or C, or D, the Glencairn. So this allows for an easier way to do that, and it also brings with it a holder. So that you could carry like all 4 of the glasses at one time if you wanted to move them all 4 like that. So it's on Kickstarter. Like I said, it's called Spirits Flight Palate Development Tool for Whiskey. They've long passed their goal already. There's 552 backers, and I think it's ending on the 31st of December. So there should be plenty of time for listeners who are interested to go look it up on Kickstarter and see if that's something you'd be interested in. It's by Aged in Ore, which is a hand-blown glass company. And the one that I was looking at was roughly, I don't know, $45 or so for the back.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, not bad. And it seems like a cool little thing that will store easily too.
And so it says it's for whiskey. Does that work for rum too?
Well, I imagine it does, Will.
I'm just asking. I'm asking that in jest because like anytime I talk about rum, like in some sort of use case in which whiskey is usually applied, that's always the question I get because I think to the average person, whiskey and rum are in totally different universes.
You're absolutely right
as far as how you enjoy them. So I was asking that as a joke,
of course. But one thing I will do is I'm going to reach out to them and say, hey, this would work for rum really well, and you should make that known. Just broaden your audience there. So yeah, that's the first one for me. And what's one of yours, Will? What do you got?
Yeah, so one that I think people would enjoy and would also be really helpful to an important piece of the larger rum community is if you just kind of like go to the website of whatever local bar or establishment in the person you are gifting the gift to, wherever they live, find whatever bar is kind of like the one that specializes in rum, whether that's a rum bar specifically, which, is more rare, obviously, or a tiki bar, that has kind of a wide rum selection. A lot of times tiki bars also, have like a great tasting menu and stuff like that. Go to their website and see what they're doing right now. A lot of them I have obviously had to get a little bit creative, think outside the box right now because they're so limited in what they can offer. And, some are doing really interesting promotions. Obviously, most of them just have gift cards available, which I think is a great gift to, obviously the person like the gift you recommended, they can't enjoy it right away. Well, in some cases, perhaps they could if it's set up for, safe imbibing in public. But at the very least, it's something that when, the virus is a little more under control and restaurants are opening more back up to 100% capacity and more traditional service settings and stuff like that. At that point, they'll have that gift card in their back pocket. They can go and enjoy some rum. And in the meantime, you're supporting those local establishments.
Exactly.
As I said, like those are such important kind of conduits for the rum community, whether it's places where people go to learn about rum, where there's events hosted, whether it's, a lot of people learn about rum for the first time through great bartenders. So if we can find ways to try to support those places, even if it's just a little bit, I think that's really important to kind of the health of the larger rum community. But I also think it's a great gift in terms of it's giving someone an experience they can have at a later date. So that is my suggestion. I think that's a gift that I would love to receive. So I think other rum enthusiasts would be in the same boat as me in that capacity.
I love that. I love the idea of that. And I love the idea that we're able to support many of our bartenders, our bars, our places that rum is home to through all of this. Yeah. And it's just kind of like saying, hey, we're here to support you still. We're ready to get right back into it as soon as it's safe to do so. I love the idea. That's the best one. I think you beat both of mine for sure.
Boom.
I love
Segment over.
I love it.
I don't even need to hear your next gift.
I don't even want to share it anymore.
I'm just kidding. I do want to hear it. I do want to hear it. So what's your second one?
Well, I guess along somewhat of the same lines is we're having a lot of people commit a little bit more to their home bars at the same time. While they're not able to visit those, and they're enriching their rum experiences at home. But here's the rub, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, Will, is that people who know you're into rum, they may want to buy you a rum, but if you don't tell them what rum, it's really hard for them to kind of know sometimes which rum to get you and that you would appreciate. So that's a hard thing because, you don't want to get the bottle. Oh, thank you. This is something either A, you already have two of, or B, it's really not something you would be that interested in.
I've given that kind of thank you before.
Yeah. So here's my idea for those people who might be thinking about that. How about something else that's related to that would be helpful that I find for me, I don't always want to spend the money on, but I think I need for my home bar, which is a set of bitters.
Yes.
Which there's some really great bitter sets out there. That you can get that would be really cool. And I love the idea of experimenting with those bitter sets. But every time I go to that aisle and I look at those, mixing components in the store, I just go, because,
I don't know if it's worth the investment.
Right. And so I think that's the kind of gift that I love getting. It's where I'm like, oh man, I've been thinking about doing that for so long, but I usually end up spending my budget more on rum than on those things. I think that's a great idea. Or, it could be something else as a mixer, Aperol or Falernum or a great bottle of vermouth.
Allspice Dram.
Any of those.
I love Allspice Dram. Yes. I was just having a conversation yesterday with a distillery here in the U.S. that makes their own Allspice Dram, and I was like, I have to know about your Allspice Dram because I'm like, obviously it's in a ton of rum cocktails. And it's a lot of it traditionally comes from Jamaica, so it has that kind of relationship with rum. There's rum in it, so there you go. Yeah. I love this gift idea.
I think it's a good one because I think it allows people to explore what they want to add to your home bar situation, but not feel the pressure of like, gosh, what rum is he gonna like or she gonna like?
Or if I spend $20 on this bottle of bitters, like, am I really going to like them? And if I don't like them, like, it takes forever to get through bitters, because you only use a little bit at a time. So,
it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Great idea.
All right. So, Will, what's your number 2?
So I'll close it out with, this is something you and I talked a little bit about because a couple weeks back on the phone, because I was on the way to a friend's house for the first time in a long time. He and his wife had just bought a new house, and I wanted to bring them a housewarming gift. And I was like, so he is mostly into whiskey, specifically bourbon most of the time. So I know he likes that. I was like, should I get him should I like, I don't know, I know a tiny bit about bourbon, but not a lot. So should I try to find like a bottle of bourbon he would like, or should I just lean on my rum experience and knowledge of rum and bring him a rum that I think he might like as a bourbon drinker? You and I decided that the rum was the best option because that's the category that I know.
Yes.
So I would say, if one thing that I love is when people, like friends of mine who are into other spirits categories, like whiskey, for example, I love when they give me something that they like a lot, because it's always interesting for me to learn a little bit about, even if it's another spirit category, just a little bit more about that. I find that my appreciation for rum grows the more I learn about other spirit categories as well.
Agree.
Not because like I dislike them. I like a lot of other spirit categories.
Yeah.
But it's always cool to get to know what someone else likes through those recommendations, you know? So for example, if I have a friend who's really into whiskey and they want to get me a bottle of something, like, dude, get me something that you like, and tell me why it's great so I can learn more about it. That's what excites me. So, you know, don't try to become a rum expert and get me the perfect rum. Give me something you like. So that would be another recommendation.
That's good advice.
Even if it's not rum, give someone something that you really enjoy. Or if you're a rum drinker and you're giving something to someone who likes whiskey, give them a rum that you really enjoy and tell them about it, educate them, that sort of thing. So that's my second one.
I think that goes to the root of gift giving, which is you're giving a piece of yourself for another person to enjoy, right?
Oh,
so
that's deep.
I didn't mean to go that deep, but there it is.
We're getting to the whole spirit of the season right here. You know, the true meaning of Christmas. So I'm glad, and we're digging in deep, and you know we're only in the intro right now.
That's right.
So on this episode, we talked to Marc Farrell, who is the founder of 10 To One Rum, which is a pretty new brand. They launched around the end of 2019 or so. So 2020 is really kind of their first full year being in the public. And anytime, you know, we talk to a brand that's new, I always try to, you know, communicate, you know, what's interesting about this brand. Why should the rum world kind of be paying attention to this? And I think 10 to 1, you know, they're part of kind of what we're trying to do with this podcast, which is broaden people's perspectives of what rum is and what rum can be, introducing it to a wider audience out there, you know, attracting new people to the category in an authentic way. And Marc, you know, just as a person has just a fascinating background. He's from the Caribbean originally. He grew up in Trinidad, came to the US at the age of 16 because he was attending MIT, you know, as most 16-year-olds do. And after that, he went on to Harvard Business School. He ended up becoming, several years later, the youngest vice president in the history of Starbucks, which is a company you may have heard of. And so he has this kind of really exceptional business educational background combined with a really foundational love of rum that goes back to where he's from and being from a place where it was around him all his life. And so, you know, I think when rum drinkers see new companies that look as great as 10 to 1 does, you know, if you look at it, it's very polished. They're very intentional about what they put out there as a company. And I think a lot of times when consumers see that, you know, they see that polish and they wonder about the authenticity of it a little bit. And Marc is that rare person who I think is capable of putting out something that has that polish, but is, you know, authentic to its core of what, you know, what it's trying to be as a brand. And that was the biggest thing that I loved about this interview was, you know, learning a little bit more about Marc's background growing up and that intersection of really caring about the product, but also really being intentional about crafting a brand in a way that is authentic and not just a bunch of, you know, marketing nonsense, so to speak.
Right. I agree totally. And I agree with your assessment of saying like he's doing something similar in a different way to what we're doing in terms of trying to elevate the rum category and the perception of rum. Let's get to it and let everybody hear this.
Yeah. All right, so we are here with Marc Farrell, the founder of 10 to 1 Rum. Really excited to get into this, Marc. I know there are lots of new rum brands out there, but yours is really interesting. You've got a really kind of fresh perspective and a story behind your brand. So really excited to talk to you today. How are you?
Yeah, doing pretty well, thanks, Will, and thanks so much for having me on. Great to finally connect with you guys, and glad to spend a little bit of time.
Absolutely. So I want to start a little bit. I'd love to hear about kind of your journey in rum from a consumer standpoint. So before you started the business and everything, you grew up in Trinidad. Rum is a big part of the culture there, much differently than it is here in the U.S. And I was interested to know what were kind of like the most common rums that were around growing up, and what were the first few rums from other parts of the Caribbean that you enjoyed as you kind of like delved deeper into it as you grew older?
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely speak to kind of my journey as a consumer because actually that is the inspiration for ultimately starting 10 to 1, right?
Right.
I'll often tell my friends, and actually many of them, I've probably had about 50 of my friends from here in the US who've been down to Trinidad to hang out with me over the years, whether it's for carnival or otherwise. So they've experienced this firsthand, but I'll often kind of tell them that the experience of rum is very different in Trinidad or more broadly in the Caribbean versus what you would typically see and experience here, right? So to answer your question, the first rum you're obviously going to find around the table if you were hanging out with me, my family, my cousins, etc., is going to be Angostura rum, right? That's kind of obviously our standard bearer, our flag bearer for Trinidadian rum. For sure, right? So you guys know the Angostura guys really well. I mean,
Yes.
Whether it would have been like a 1919 or an 1824 or something like that, always present. If you're looking at rum sort of beyond Trinidad, one of our family favorites for a long time has been El Dorado. So we celebrate we celebrate Christmas as like a unit, right? My mom's side of the family, all my cousins are like my extended siblings, and so we all do Christmas together. You'll usually see my uncles, myself, my dad, drinking, either the Eldo 15, 21, maybe even the 25 for super special occasions. That's another one you'd see around for us a lot.
Nice. Yeah, and I guess that makes sense. I mean, Trinidad isn't too far from Guyana, right?
Yeah, not very far from Guyana. I mean, I think we have a lot of shared sort of historical context, right? People are always surprised to hear that if you actually look at us from a population perspective, Trinidad has just as many people of African descent as they do of Indian descent, right? And
right.
Guyana has a very similar makeup, right? And the reasons for that, by the way, all tied to rum. You go back to the days of the sugarcane plantation, sort of post-slavery, right? And in both cases, whereas the plantations were largely abandoned on other Caribbean islands, the colonial folks at the time wanted to bring in indentured labor to continue to work those plantations. And so, in Trinidad, you had this migration of folks from India making sort of their virgin voyages across some very tough seas to sort of take their place in the plantation. So yes, I mean, geographically similar, a lot of sort of ethnographical elements that are similar. And generally speaking, I mean, for us, I just have a ton of respect for Demerara, to be honest, right? I mean, I think it's some of the most elegant rum that you can find anywhere in the world. And so I think, it's part proximity, but also just part appreciation for what those guys have been able to do.
Yeah. It's always so interesting to ask just kind of like what rums are around at different islands in the Caribbean, because sometimes it's surprising what you find out. Like I know you go to Puerto Rico, for example, and you see everyone, drinking Don Q there. Like that is the iconic local rum. Everyone goes, or Palo Viejo is another one in Puerto Rico that you're not as much aware of if you're, coming from the mainland. So that is interesting. I was guessing it would be Angostura, but I was prepared to be kind of like surprised, like maybe there was another local brand I didn't know about or something like that. So that's very cool.
There's Angostura. Those expressions I mentioned are probably sort of on the higher end of the market, But if you're sort of just chilling on the beach in Trinidad, you'd see brands like Fernandez, Black Label, and White Oak, and other domestic brands that certainly have a ton of market share in Trinidad that you don't really see on the export market anywhere, right?
And the Fernandez, that was a distillery in Trinidad, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Is it still open? Because for some reason I was under the impression that it was closed now.
Yeah, no, so yeah, the Trinidad story is a little complicated in a lot of different ways. So no, I mean, like, you know, we are an exceptional people, but certainly complicated in a few different ways. But no, yeah, Black Label and stuff still exists. The story of closure in Trinidad usually orbits around Caroni, right? So Caroni 1975 Limited, which is really
right.
which is where some the sugar, right? That was like the cane fields and stuff in central Trinidad that were then used both in the sugar refining process and ultimately in the production of rum, right? Caroni 1975 was government owned for, well, I mean, really for a long time. Ultimately, was not financially viable and was forced to close kind of in the early 2000s. And as a result, then even when you look at sort of what Angostura has to do today in terms of the distillation of their rum, you know, they're bringing in stock from other islands and stuff and really kind of building their book that way. So Caroni is no longer with us. That's also why you see a lot of their old rums on the aftermarket, right? Highly sought after, like that Caroni 2000 and stuff that you see, right?
Mythic status.
The mythic status, right? The lost barrels.
The lost distillery,
right? Exactly. So there's a lot of fanfare around that.
Yeah.
I was curious to hear if any of the brands that Caroni owned were, you know, still around kind of when you were growing up, because I know it was around 2003 or so that the distillery closed. So I wasn't sure if those were some of the popular brands that were circulating around Trinidad in your early years.
Yeah, no. So no. In our early years, yeah. I mean, Angostura has always kind of been the dominant brand, particularly when you sort of move up market. You know, we talked about Fernandez, and there's a host of others that I could name drop on here too. I mean, Caroni never owned a rum, right? So there was never a brand in Trinidad called Caroni, right?
Yeah.
Caroni was sort of like the what would you call it? So not the industrial complex, but like the plantation essentially that was the feeder system, right? That's where your stock came from. That was then again used in both the sugar granulation process and ultimately as an input into rum. So yeah, it actually, well, when I first saw a bottle of Caroni, you know, out here in the wild, quote unquote, outside of Trinidad, I was actually surprised the very first time I saw this. I was like, Caroni, like, well, we don't have. Like who made this rum? And then I kind of uncovered the story over time, you know. But yeah, you wouldn't walk into a bar in Trinidad and ask somebody for Caroni. They'd give you directions. They wouldn't. It's a place. They give you directions. Yeah. They would not pull a bottle down from their back bar for sure.
So turning the focus a little bit to 10 to 1 now, Mark.
Right, we made you talk about all these other distilleries. So now we should probably talk about your actual rum brand.
All good, man. All good.
but a good start, and it all feeds into this, which is, you know, you bill 10 to 1 as a Caribbean rum. So and that's a blend, if I'm correct, of 4 distinct Caribbean nations. Is that right?
Yeah. That's right.
And then, so I guess one of the questions I had for you was, how did you go about selecting which nations and which distilleries would make up this blend? And, you know, who was involved in that? How long did it take you before you were like, okay, this is the one. Yep, let's go with this.
Yeah, it's a good question. And actually, I'll actually a minor little digression because it's related to the question that Will asked and then what you just asked, John. But is, you know, because Will asked the question, my journey as a consumer, and really I would say that ends up leading into your question, right? Which is, you know, I left Trinidad as a 16-year-old. I mean, I'm Trinidadian passport, my parents are at home, etc. But you know, I've lived in the US for the better part of 20 years at this point, and so you know, my entire life as a functioning adult consumer has been in the US and also in the UK, and really. That journey, right, is what sort of led to the creation of 10 to 1 and certainly the blends that are in the bottles. And so what I always describe to people is, you know, think of me and all my friends when we're in college, you know, 20, 21, whatever years old, you know, and kind of what you were drinking out of your college dorm room. And then, you know, you get your first job out of college, your second job, you go to grad school, et cetera. I, for such a long time, saw this progression in the journeys of my friends, right? Who were, whether you were a gin drinker, vodka drinker, tequila drinker, now more recently mezcal, etc., right? Where you kind of walked into a bar and the things you were calling for, right, were, I mean, certainly higher price point, more curated, but also felt like they were better quality, better story around them, etc. And I think in a lot of ways, for me as a consumer of rum, I had a massive struggle with that here, right? Like Like, and
Yes.
I'm not gonna shame anyone by name or anything here, but there were, I walk into a bar in Soho or in Nolita here in New York, and the options for me as a consumer, as a lover of rum, were felt really narrow and very limited, right? And so, for me, kind of the first port of call, even before thinking about the specific countries, is really about how do we find a way to elevate the category, right? Like elevate the perception of rum for many consumers here. Because again, you guys asked me, what would we drink at home? What would we enjoy at home? Those are some pretty, I think some pretty outstanding, exceptional spirits in their own right. And rum is a very elevated, very versatile category for sure. So for me, when I started to think about, what kind of goes in the bottle, first and foremost, trying to create something exceptional. Secondly, now back to your question, John, this idea of creating a blend was really captivating to me and to us, I should say, because it was myself and my friend Zach when we were kind of getting this whole process started 3 years ago. But it is not meant to be a Trinidadian creating a Trinidadian rum. I think that I want to tell the story of the Caribbean. I want to tell a story of the quality that exists and the heritage and the culture and all of those pieces. And certainly that's brought to life through 10 to 1's blends. With our dark rum, you're right. It's a blend from 4 different countries: Trinidad, of course, Barbados, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic, right? All of which have really exceptional rum heritages in their own rights, right?
Correct,
And when I was creating the blend, one of the things I thought about, again, so imagine me, I'm in Flatiron, I walk into a bar, I see on the back bar, there's some really elegant sipping rum. I kind of call for it from the bartender. He brings it over. He maybe dusts it off as he pulls it off the shelf, right? And pours me a dram. And, I conjure that imagery because in some ways, that bottle clearly hasn't been called for by somebody for a while until I walked into that bar. And so when I created our dark rum, I said, we need to have something that is extraordinarily versatile. You asked me to describe our rum in a single word, it's versatile. You need to be able to enjoy it neat, on the rocks, splash of soda water or coconut water, which is how I'd recommend mixing it if you want to, and also can play in sort of the elevated craft cocktail space. You walk into the Nomad Hotel or Court or the Aviary or whatever, and you're going to find 10 to 1 featuring prominently there. And so in choosing the different countries that ended up sort of being built into the blend, it was a combination of factors, a combination of, again, sort of celebrating that pan-Caribbean culture and heritage, but also picking out very specific elements and specific profiles, right? So I always kind of point to Jamaican rum first and foremost, right? Because, so many of them, big, bold, funky, lot of volatiles, high ester, pot still rum. We have a little bit of that actually in our aged rum, in our dark rum, which is, I think, quite unique. And what that does both to the nose of the rum, you get some of those, a little bit of that funk, a little bit of those banana notes, some cooked fruit, right? Alongside the baking spice from that typical barrel aged rum experience that really live together very, very well on the nose, On the palate, you're going to get a little bit of cedar, a little bit of toffee, a little bit of actually a little bit of baking spice coming through on the palate too, for sure. Moderate acidity, actually a little bit dry on the finish. And again, if you think about a Dominican rum or even a Trini rum in many ways, we have a very different soil composition from say a Jamaica or even a Barbados. They can drink a little drier. I wanted to really battle this perception that rum is cloying, overly sweet, sugar bomb, right?
Same here.
That's what many, right? Listen, we're on a mission together, guys.
That's right.
So I tell people that the exercise of creating the rums was, call it sort of one part, Caribbean culture heritage, another part sort of taste profile, if you will, and then even another part in terms of sort of I'd almost call it strategic in a sense. What are some of the long held beliefs about rum that we want to combat? I just kind of mentioned that overly cloying piece, a little dry on the finish. Our rums, by the way, have no added sugar, no added color, no added anything, right? If you do that, that's your thing, that's fine, but we don't do it on our side as well. We're trying to kind of, again, battle that perception that some consumers may have. So a lot of different things, I would say, that kind of went into that process of creating both the dark and the white rum.
And mentioning the white rum too, also, because we talked a lot about the blend of the dark. So I know that the white rum is column still, right, from Dominican Republic, and also pot still from Jamaica. Is that Is that right as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have a similar thought kind of going in with the unaged also in terms of, obviously there's a lot of differences between a traditional usage of a dark rum and a white rum, but what was kind of the strategy and thinking? Is that something you also wanted people to think about sipping as a white rum, or is that really still in a different space?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I again, if you're gonna go back to this, the initial seed here, the initial mandate, which was to try to find ways to elevate the category. Obviously you want to put out a really high quality sort of aged rum or dark rum on the market to get that done. But we looked at the white rum category and said, there's a big opportunity here as well, right? Because I think for a lot of consumers, and again, I'm just going to kind of use the US as an example because that's where we are today. A lot of consumers in the US, I think, to me, equivocate the white rum category with a single bottle. Like there's one bottle that they all know that they've all seen, and that's kind of white rum, and there's sort of nothing else beyond it, right?
Right.
You guys, $5, whoever can guess what it is, but I think
usually it's just referred to as the brand name rather than white rum. When people talk about it as an ingredient.
Yeah, that's also absolutely right. It's an ingredient, which, by the way, listen, let's give credit where it's due, right? If you get to that place of ubiquity, then
sure,
you've done something right over the years. But I think for us, we wanted to kind of challenge that assumption as to sort of the breadth and the depth of white rum as a category. If you're a big rum nerd like me, sit on here and geek out with you guys all day on this, right? You have a great appreciation for Jamaican pot still rums, right? Like, big, bold, funky, high proof,
high ester,
right? Super dynamic.
I think for so many people who tumble down the rum rabbit hole, like that first whiff they get of, a Ray and Nephew or a Smith and Cross or something, that's accessible here in the US, like that's when you're like, oh my God, there's something's going on with this category that I didn't know about,
Yeah, exactly. Whoa, like wait, this is rum? Wait, what do you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And we thought, but by that same token, I think for a lot of consumers, if you give somebody a super hot, really high ester overproof rum, it's going to be a bit inaccessible for them, right? And so we thought that with our white rum, we would thread a needle, we'd bring some of those elements. You're going to kind of pick up some of those grassy, herbaceous notes, a little bit of fresh citrus, etc., on the nose of this rum. We have people who buy the rum, who fall in love with the rum off the nose alone. They haven't even tasted it yet. And then when you dive in and you taste it, right? Zesty, clean, refreshing, a little bit of minerality. Those are the words you typically hear people describe it as. It actually is at 90 proof. One of the things we thought about a ton in the product development was this perception that a lot of white rums kind of just disappear into the back of a cocktail, right? Like you don't even know they're there. You want something that has real body, that has personality, that can actually express itself. And I think our white rum does that extraordinarily well, So as much, the dark rum to me is an excellent spirit without a doubt. I think as we've been introducing it to the trade over the last year and change, I think the white rum is the one that a lot of folks kind of point at as having real potential to be a bit of an industry game changer in its own right. So we're really excited about what we've been able to create on that side of the fence too.
Right. It's like a proper introduction into a Caribbean white rum almost in how you're trying to do that with that threading the needle, like you said, so that it's not too inaccessible, but it provides what you need to experience what a high quality white Caribbean rum would be.
Exactly. It has body, it has character, it has intrigue. You put that on your shelf, you take that over to a party at your friend's house, like they've never had anything like that before. So it does all of that stuff, right? It leaves a real impression, but it doesn't feel like you're on a room, it doesn't feel too remote. Something you can access. Let me help you understand how to mix it, right? So you asked the question before about what is it designed to do. So of course it makes an extraordinary daiquiri, right? If you can't do that with your white rum, then you're sort of you're
start over.
You're on an island all to yourself. It's over. But for us, again, sort of whether you're having consumers mix it with soda water or coconut water. Actually, my dad's a big gin and tonic drinker. He now drinks 10 to 1 white and tonic.
I'm trying to tell more people that a rum and tonic is a great drink, because I so rarely, even people who like rum, I don't hear it talked about that much. But over the past year or so, I've made several at home, and I'm always like, damn, this is a great drink. Like, why isn't this more of a thing? Especially if you have a rum with a little bit of character, like you're saying,
exactly,
where it's not just going to disappear. It's a great drink.
It's a great drink, and for sure. And we found that people who typically are sort of like either they like a botanica like a gin, or they like even like a agave drinkers tend to really resonate towards our white, with our dark rum, with the ex-bourbon barrel aging and some of the notes that are on there. If you're a bourbon or whiskey lover, certainly you're going to fall in love there as well. And then actually on that note, one of the things that we talk about a ton is how do we build bridges to consumers in other categories, right?
Yeah.
That's extraordinarily important for us, right? Like I'm trying to create this big tent for the world of rum. Yes, I want people who drink rum today to trade up, right? To experience Ten To One for the first time. But I also want to welcome you in if your current calling card is mezcal or gin or American whiskey or whatever the case is, right?
Yeah. And real quick before we move on, I know because people listening to this are rum nerds, like you said, and I want to make sure, I know they're going to be wondering, what distilleries and stuff go into the blend. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the 10 to 1 dark, the Barbados is Foursquare, Dominican Republic is AFD, Trinidad, Angostura, as we said, and Jamaica is Worthy Park. Is that correct?
Yep. Wonderful.
Okay, great. So just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. So some great,
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, some fan favorite distilleries.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. Some great houses in there, without a doubt.
Yeah. So as you were talking about kind of like expanding that big tent of rum, welcoming people to it, I know the tagline of the brand is Rum Reimagined. You're trying to kind of broaden the occasions and contexts in which people enjoy rum. And I know, like, for me as a rum consumer, when I look around, I feel like I see more and more new brands springing up that are after some of the same goals. And that's not to say that yours isn't unique, because, you bring your own perspective, your own nuance and approach, your own brand. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, when you look around at the marketplace, do you feel like you see other kindred spirits like trying to lift the category as well? Is there a sense of like being after the same goals in the category, or does it still feel like sort of a lonely fight from the business perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a really good question. Somewhere in the middle, and I hate saying that. I mean, in that, and let me explain. It doesn't feel lonely, because certainly, anybody who's playing in the rum space, doesn't matter whether you started a brand or you're an ambassador, or maybe you're behind the bar. So many of our favorite bartenders, rum is their favorite drink, right? Like, I mean, we all want to see the category sort of like grow and flourish and really sort of assume the place that it deserves in the consciousness of the everyday consumer. So it's not lonely in that way, right? I just kind of walk to the nearest bar and we saddle up, have a drink in non-COVID times, I should say. And you're going to find a lot of resonance there for sure. So it isn't lonely so much. As far as kindred spirits, though, not really, and I don't say that from any sort of a place of hubris in the slightest, right? I just think that the 10 to 1 story and the journey is very specific and very personal, right? I mean, again, like, this is a Trinidadian guy who's kind of born and raised, who's come here and spent a bunch of time and is trying to kind of tell the story of rum through our lens. And so I think to really kind of find a kindred spirit, I'd have to see like another young Trini guy or young Jamaican lady kind of out there sort of doing the same thing. And by the way, even if that was kind of where they were from, the way they might choose to kind of approach the space and the way they might choose to tell the story is probably even then going to be different, right? So no, I mean, I think certainly others want to elevate the category for sure. Certainly we won't claim to be the only ones trying to be standard bearers there. I'm not silly, but I think and I hope we're taking a very unique approach to the space.
And by the way, we kind of went right through it without touching on this. I'm sure some people who are listening to you for the first time are curious about the 10 to 1 name, and I bring it up because I know it ties into that whole perspective and whole bringing in different aspects of the Caribbean and stuff. Can you share with people kind of the story behind that and the connection it has to Trinidad? Because I believe it comes from a quote, but I won't spoil it for you. I'll leave it to you.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, no, you're right. I I tell anyone who crosses my path or our path as a team, I was like, every element of this brand is intentional. If you had a bottle sitting in front of you right now, you said, where's the name come from? You know, why the logo? Why these colors? What's the side? Every element of this brand is intentional, and it starts with the name. So the name 10 to 1, as you were alluding to, it's actually inspired by the original Caribbean Federation, right? Which consisted of 10 countries. So it's the idea of, 10 becoming one. And as Trinidad's prime minister at the time said, he said, 1 from 10 equals 0. He was making the point that if you remove one from the collective, the whole thing falls apart. And so, we like to kind of reference that and say that, 10 to 1 as a brand is really kind of grounded in this idea of community, strength in numbers, this notion that we're stronger together than we are apart, right? So that really kind of creates the moorings of the brand. And whether it's the name, whether it's, our logo, which is actually the scarlet ibis, the national bird of Trinidad, or, the label design, which is actually a riff off of these old shipping labels from the early days of the sugarcane trade. We thought we could create a bottle that feels very elevated, very sleek, very contemporary, but is grounded in real tenets of Caribbean history and culture and heritage, right? You don't have to sacrifice those things in order to make something that feels really dope, really modern. And also, you don't have to be overly literal and caricaturized to represent the Caribbean, right? Like, everything doesn't have to be like pirate ships or maps of some islands or any of that stuff. We can do stuff that feels very modern and still is grounded in that storytelling.
Yeah, I think that's good to hear, because I know, Will and I often talk about American-made rum, and, I know Will does the fabulous American Rum Report newsletter, for those that don't know, but one of the things that we discuss a lot about American rum is that it can be hard to categorize. In other words, we all know what the identity of a Barbados rum is, or a Martinique rum,
right?
But we don't really have a good grasp on what an American rum is. And that's probably because I think we're a federation of 50 states, and many of the regions, or even the states, all have very different identities and their cultures and different ways of making rum and producing rum and nuance. So I think that's good to hear in terms of what your thoughts are about how you're approaching the idea of the Caribbean as one kind of geographic entity, but also attempting to preserve the individual cultures of the places where this rum is made and the identities and the production style of the nations that go into it. So you said everything is done with intention. And so it was your intention through these blends to both represent the Caribbean as well as those individual rum-making countries. And is that kind of what has led you to this point, and that's where you want to be?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the question. It's actually really, really well said, to be honest. I mean, yes, I think it's a combination of the two. Like I said, when we were describing how the blends were created, again, Jamaican rums, Bajan rums, Trini rums, Martinican rums, they're all incredibly different, right? And each island, each country takes a lot of pride in their own heritage, right? And if you're hanging out in New York, with a Jamaican who's touting their Appleton or their Worthy Park, the Dominicans are talking about their Brugal, the Bajans with their Mangue or their Foursquare, and the list kind of goes on, right? There's a lot of pride there. So to me, the idea of creating the blend from a product perspective really does say, we had some intention around whether it's a pot versus a column still, whether it's an aged versus an unaged, how do you bring those pieces to bear to create something sort of exceptional in that vein of 10 to 1, right? So you're celebrating them individually and bringing that product to life. When I think about the brand 10 to 1, though, it really does have this collectivist mindset around it, right? The idea, again, we're stronger together than we are apart. As a brand story, if you went on our Instagram, sure, we talk about things that are distinctly Trinidad, distinctly Jamaican, or distinctly, Barbadian or Lucian or whatever it might be. But like the story of the brand, the ethos of the brand is it's a Caribbean lens, not a Trinidadian brand that we're creating. So yes, I mean, it's an important distinction to make, and it's saying that under this tent, and let's kind of keep on using this visual metaphor, right? Under this tent that we call the Caribbean, there's lots of very distinct, unique individual characters that exist, and they each deserve to be celebrated. But I'm coming and I'm presenting you different facets of that story through 10 to 1 as a brand.
Right. It's just like a machine. A machine runs because it has different parts that are interlocking and working with each other to create something greater than that.
Exactly. And to me, the common tenets, I mean, so if you think about Jamaica versus Trinidad or whatever, keep on using those examples, but is there's something about the fabric of I was talking about this celebration being sort of core to who we are as a people, part of our essence, part of our very fabric. And again, the way that presents will be different. Like Trinidad Carnival is the most epic celebration you'll ever go to anywhere in the world, I guarantee it. And I'm not biased, I promise anybody who's listening, right? And Jamaica will have their own versions of how that comes to life. But we all do have this very unique kind of joie de vivre, this unique sort of lens on celebration. And so that to me is a good example of a story that you can tell in a way that feels like it's resonant no matter where you go in the Caribbean. We talk about this idea of the birthplace of celebration, bringing that to life in a lot of ways. So yeah, there's opportunity, I think, to kind of acknowledge and in fact celebrate the differences, but still do it sort of under a common banner, which is the banner of the 10 to 1 brand.
Yeah, I think, John and I often talk about one of the things that drew us to rum in the first place was, you get to know a particular country's rums, and through that you kind of tumble down the rabbit hole of their history, their culture, and everything. And it's just this like incredible lens to kind of explore different cultures, history, and things like that. And looking through the 10 to 1 Instagram feed, and you guys do a really cool job of like highlighting different figures from the Caribbean. Like I think I saw a post with Derek Walcott in it, who wrote Omeros, which it took me back to I was an English major in college, and it took me back to reading that book then. And it's really cool just the way you mentioned you grew up in Trinidad, but this is a Caribbean rum, and it's not just all about Trinidad, it's about highlighting different places. So it's cool to seeing that come to fruition, and like being able to put the spotlight on these different figures throughout Caribbean history and learn more about them. Like Eric Williams, for example, was someone who I was not familiar with prior to learning about 10 to 1. So keep it up is what I'm saying. It's really cool. No,
I appreciate that. So one of the core pillars of the brand, right, is this idea we call it Caribbean made. Right. And Caribbean, when I say Caribbean made, right, I often tell people, like, you don't have to be born and raised in Trinidad with a Trinidadian passport to be Caribbean made like me, right? I mean, if your mother or your grandmother is from the Caribbean, that to me is Caribbean made. If you've been to Trinidad Carnival twice, so you've been to the beaches of Montego Bay or whatever, that to me is actually Caribbean made. If you grew up right here in the US, right? Maybe you grew up in Brooklyn or DC or Miami, right? And you've been anywhere, and you've been surrounded by Caribbean music, art, fashion, food. Those are points of inspiration.
That's John down there.
Hey, I was going to say,
John down there in Miami.
Will and Mark, I'm Caribbean made. I'm feeling very happy about that.
John, that's what I'm trying to tell you, bro. You're Caribbean made. Welcome to the club.
I've got to get my 2 trips to Carnival, and
I was going to say I'm coming with you.
Yeah,
I can be more Caribbean made than I am now,
exactly.
right?
Everyone, you can always be exactly. There's different levels of Caribbean made. So we can get you some additional tenure here for sure, right?
Excellent.
So however you want to do it, whether it's some trips to Carnival or whatever, we can make it happen. But I mean, but to your point, Will, you mentioned it, like, we want to wrap our arms around a much bigger, broader idea of what it means to be Caribbean made, right? I think if you tell the story that way, and again, I don't have a chance to meet every consumer of 10 to 1 or create every post myself, but like, my hope is that people will kind of start to see that and get that essence from our Instagram, from our website, from our press, whatever it might be. So you say, like, yeah, there is something about this brand that I can identify with, right? There is something here that resonates with me on a personal level. I don't have to, again, have been to Port of Spain, Trinidad to call myself part of this collective,
Yeah.
And so we try to showcase that as much as we can.
Circling back a bit, one question that popped in my head, you were talking about how intentional you were with every aspect of the brand. If someone has a question about something on the label, like there was something you thought about that there was a reason behind it. And one of the favorite topics of conversation among geeky rum people is categorizations of rum and how to describe them, and seeing the 10 to 1 blend. It's a blend of aged rums, and you have 10 to 1 dark on the label, and dark is one of those rum descriptors that, like, I feel like rum fans have a complicated relationship with, where it has a lot of utility because people have that familiarity with dark rum as a thing that exists, but then you also have the dark rums that it doesn't always mean it's aged. Sometimes it's, from coloring that's been added. And I'm curious how, like, what the thought process was in terms of, did you consider calling it 10 to 1 aged or 10 to 1 dark? Mm-hmm. Like, what was the debate, the decision making process in that?
Yeah, no, great question, and I'll say that I'm right there alongside all those rum nerds and geeks who feel strongly about it, right? So in many ways, I think one of the beauties of rum has been one of its biggest challenges, right? Like, think about champagne for a second, right?
Yeah.
Or any of these sort of varietals that like have a specific region, have a specific method, right?
Geographic indicator,
yes, geographic indicator or method of creation, distillation, or otherwise. Like, there are rules of the road that you cannot depart from in order to be, right? And rum, part of the beauty of rum is that, like, okay, your agricole, your molasses, your pot, your column, your aged, your unaged, your blend, your knock, like whatever, all this
sounds
stuff.
like a Katy Perry song.
Yeah, right. Might be my second calling, guys. Let's see what we can do. Singer songwriter. I think, look, certainly there's a lot. I think particularly with the spice rum category in the US, I think it's used in a lot of ways as a catch-all for lots of stuff, right? Like, wait, it's amazing to me how many consumers don't know that like the 10 to 1 dark rum is an aged rum. I'm like, well, it was aged in a barrel. It's an 8-year-old rum, et cetera, right? And like, well, that's because they're currently in market drinking rums that are unaged that have coloring attached to them, right? Yep. Nobody would ever ask you that question about a whiskey, by the way. You just know that whiskey is barrel aged, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a challenge that we face on a daily basis. And again, I want to be kind of part of the solution for that, right? So whether it's, again, talking about sort of the distilleries that are in our blends or the ages of the rums or whatever, like, we kind of live a life of transparency here. To answer your question about the dark versus the white, there's actually a very simple answer for it. The answer is, I use the taxonomy that we're used to in Trinidad. It actually is as simple as that. So in Trinidad, you wouldn't like point to something on the shelf and say, let me get that age. You just, that's not really what you say. Like, you'd say the dark. People call it dark and white, again, because actually spice rum doesn't exist as a category in Trinidad. So like, if I'm pointing at the dark rum, it is aged, right? It's just kind of known that that's what it is, right? So yeah, honestly, and it's probably hard to kind of please everyone, because if you could have said aged, for example, on it, but then yes, I just thought that, like, given where I'm from and given the way that people refer to it down there, you could talk about the white rum or the silver rum, you could talk about the dark or the aged or what have you. We just kind of went with the taxonomy that was most familiar to us. That's the simple answer.
No, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I remember, I think it was Richard Steele who was talking about white rum being a term that goes way, way back in Barbados, and I can't remember the exact reasoning with it, but you find that a lot, that these terms that you think mean one thing or mean something different somewhere else. And yeah, I knew there would be something interesting behind it, because, like you said, there's intention behind everything. So moving on from the two blends, so those were kind of like what you've launched with, sort of the flagship. Also, you just launched your first reserve release, which is it's a limited release, I think, for 17-year-old casks from Trinidad, 1,200 bottles. Yep. So I'd love to hear more about the rum itself, but also what was the process like that led you to this particular rum as your first limited release? Because obviously you have a lot of different options from all over the Caribbean. So why this rum? Why now? What was the process like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say a couple of things. Well, let's start with actually kind of why now. Kind of going back to the mission statement of 10 to 1, which is, rum reimagined. We want to kind of elevate perceptions of the category. We want to challenge expectations, right? Like, everything you thought you knew about rum, not Will and John, everything you, the consumer, thought you knew about rum. Let me find a way to kind of turn it on its head. And so we're going to keep on finding ways to sort of like push the envelope and do that, right? Now, and again, I'm biased, but I think our two core SKUs are excellent, not just in terms of taste profile, but in terms of what they're able to do, right? Again, they're very versatile. Sip them, mix them, higher end cocktail program, et cetera, et cetera. Those two core SKUs are going to be around kind of forever, But I think that, like, there's I think we have a unique opportunity to kind of do some more storytelling, to shed light on, again, like other corners of the rum universe, right, that might be unseen, and you kind of build that appreciation. So I would love for us to kind of create a rhythm. This is our very first reserve, as you mentioned. We've only been around for a year and change, a year and a half. But I think we'll do like one or two of these every year, honestly, right? And
awesome.
you know,
That's great to hear.
Yeah. So there's lots, you know, if you guys like the first one, there's lots to be excited about coming down the path after that too. And you know, you'll find different ways, right? So for example, I've often said to people that even though the rums that we have are blends, right? I actually dream of a day when there are so many consumers in the US who are familiar with the nuances between the different countries that like maybe they're asking us for like single origins, right? So help me understand, like put a Barbados rum next to a Jamaican rum, next to a Trini rum, and kind of go down the line next to a Guyanese rum, and sort of go down the line from there. And you know, again, maybe that comes.
That's
up.
what I do in my house all the time, Mark.
you just stack them up. You have your own personal.
Yep. I go, all right, let's try this one. Let's go put it against this one. I love that about rum, and that's one of the reasons I got into it in the first place. And I think it's such a strength of rum.
Absolutely,
is that it has that diversity, and yet you can appreciate all of the different things. So you should do that. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Okay. Well, awesome. So I have your blessing. So I'm just gonna go do more of it and make it happen. You know? But it's that you want more people to have that curiosity. Oh, okay, cool. I tried the last one. So how is this one different? So why? Right? So that really kind of sets the table for why this reserve, why now, and like a little sneak peek into kind of what's to come in 2021 and beyond. We thought it'd be extra special. We looked at a lot of candidates, if you will, and we tried a bunch of different rums, and we looked at blending a couple and a bunch of different pathways that we were going to take here. But we actually ultimately decided that, you know, doing a single cask would be really impactful for the reasons I just mentioned, right? Like the blend versus the kind of the single origin type story. I use single origin from my old coffee days at Starbucks.
Right. I was going to say that reminds me of coffee, which makes sense given your background from Starbucks. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. So I kind of interchange them sort of for some additional romance, but like the single origin piece, you know, from Trinidad, it's my homeland. It's where I'm born and raised. It's so integral to the story. It just felt right. It felt like the first reserve should be from Trinidad. It should kind of stand on its own. It's a really, really exceptional rum. 17 years old, as I think you were kind of mentioning before. You know, we had 4 casks of it. Each one was sort of bottled individually. So you got a bottle that says, you know, cask 2, bottle 64, or whatever the case is, and kind of gives you a pathway.
So the casks weren't all blended together.
No, they weren't. They're actually bottled individually. Yeah.
Cool.
So one thing I've heard you refer to a lot, not necessarily in this interview, but in other ones, is kind of the team at 10 to 1. And I know you mentioned your co-founder, Zach, earlier. You also have kind of a board of advisors. And I heard you mention the importance of having them, as the phrase used was having adults in the room as you build this company. You mentioned there's some, I think, former executives from Diageo, Beam Suntory, Starbucks as well. I think I remember that.
Yep.
I'm interested in, with that kind of team in place, what kind of decisions have you been able to make early on? Or maybe a better way of phrasing it is, are there any specific problems you've been able to avoid that most new companies, most new spirits brands aren't able to, because you have that high level of guidance involved and having those adults in the room, as you put it?
Yeah, totally. And I love you guys. I always say like adults in the room or adult supervision, which makes a difference.
Right.
I was doing another podcast a few months ago, by the way, and I at some point kind of referred to myself as a young guy, just kind of like off the cuff, a young guy building a business, and the guy I was talking to was awesome. Just kind of raised an eyebrow because he's like, "Wait, do you still call yourself young?" I'm like, "Well, shit, like I'm 38, so I guess not really, like my parents think I'm."
No, young. I need you to call yourself young because I'm 32, so I'm creeping up behind you, and I want to still keep using that. So we'll go with young guy.
I'm young and I'm older than you, Mark, so you're young.
All right, so
there you go.
So we're young. There you have it, everybody. 38 years old is officially considered young. I'll tell you, bro, like 32 to 38 creeps up on you fast. So
I know, man.
It does.
So yes, I still think of myself as like a young, precocious entrepreneur trying to make some stuff happen. And yeah, those guys have been incredible. we didn't talk too much about sort of my pre-10 to 1 background, but I had a startup. Before 10 to 1, I was an executive at Starbucks for 3 years. And before that, I actually had another startup in the sports and media space. And you used the word earlier. You asked me if it's a lonely journey. And I said, no, this is not a lonely journey. I actually know what a lonely journey is like. With my first startup, it was a lonely journey. It was it was a challenging business, pushing a boulder uphill. Very cool company that we created, but it was just, it was hard, and it was lonely, right? That's when you say lonely, that gets conjured in my mind.
Plus, there was less rum along the way.
Less rum along the way, you know. And so like, let me tell you something. If you're the founder of a rum company, you get invited to everything, right? Everybody just knows you're going to bring a bottle of rum, right? You know, my popularity is soaring, even if my rum stock is being depleted, you know. So, but no, like. One of the things I promised myself that I would do if I ever started another company, and it was a big if, but it became when, was that I would really sort of out of the gate try to surround myself with as many sort of fine minds, yes, but also tremendous advocates for the business and for the brand, and that's really what we have with our board. Like they're all exceptional, to be honest, right? Like they're actually nothing short of it, and I mean that as people too, you know, like. My board is not a board that you're going to put up as like a figurehead and say, oh, I have this dude. I don't know his last name. I can't call him. I can't tell you the last time we had a conversation. Like, we talk all the time, you know, and they've been really valuable in, you ask sort of like what it's allowed us to do. Maybe it's some of the things that it's allowed us to not do that have almost been more valuable, right? Like, let me, hey, young 38-year-old guy, let me give you the benefit of some hindsight and some perspective here. Let me send you back to the drawing board to maybe rethink. And it could be anything, right? It could be something as tactical as how many new markets we're launching, or it could be as spiritual as how we're telling the story of the brand. You know, I'm thinking a lot about sort of Rob, who's ex-Diageo, and we talk a lot about sort of leading with some of the credential of the brand, right? Like really kind of like the core facets of like why the product is an excellent product, and then you can, you know, build the storytelling and the creative juice around it. I'm obviously big on the storytelling stuff with the things like the Rum Reimagined and the challenge expectations and Caribbean made and all of that stuff. So it's been a really amazing mix, an amazing soup of kind of very tactical, roll up your sleeves, you know, how do you go to market, right? Like, where do you deploy resources? Where do you spend time and money? To some of just the more like strategic or creative elements of things as well, you know. Even, you know, you mentioned somebody on the board who's ex-Starbucks, Sharon Rothstein, who was my boss at Starbucks. She was our CMO, and I worked with her. You know, obviously she's had an incredible career, you know, building some of the most iconic brands in the world. So she's great from that perspective, but she's also great from a people perspective. You know, it's actually nice to have someone. You should have someone who actually understands you on a fundamental level, right? Who knows how you think about not just the business, but think about the world, think about building a team, thinking about interacting with others, and like having a great sounding board for that type of thing, I think is extraordinarily helpful too. So, you know, I could ramble on and on about how amazing they've been, but no, I think we owe a lot of gratitude to that little motley crew.
Yeah. Along with your professional background and putting together that team, I know there's been a lot written about your incredibly impressive and diverse educational experience as well. My day job, I work for a higher education institution as well. So education is dear to me. And I can see clearly how graduating from MIT with a chemical engineering degree is relevant, and an MBA from Harvard is entirely relevant and advantageous to what you're doing now. I know you also graduated with a master's in philosophy in technology policy from Cambridge University. It's less clear to me, both A, what that is, and B, how you apply that education and experience into your current efforts. And I was hoping you could share that with us.
Well, listen, if it's not, you know, it's not clear to you, it's not clear to me either. I want to tell you, you know, like it's a mouthful. It's a lot of stuff. No, so technology policy it's think of like a public policy degree that's focused on like the world of science and technology. That's really what it was, right? So you know, we look at things like the opening up of the electricity market in the UK in the 1980s and things like that. Just a secret between the three of us, but I'm a huge sports fan. I played a ton of sports in high school and then also in college. I actually part of my reason for going back to Cambridge to do that master's was really just like another 1 year boondoggle. I went and played basketball for Cambridge for a year.
Nice.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Cool.
We beat Oxford. I just gotta make sure I mention that, because anybody out there.
There you go.
Your life is complete then.
Life, listen, man, that was it. The mountaintop, and it's been a long and slow decline since then. But yeah, that was part of the reason for the Cambridge stuff. And also my twin sister, by the way, who's also my best friend, but she studied at Cambridge as well, so it gave us a chance to spend a couple of years hanging out together too. So yeah, lots of reasons that are kind of hidden in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, that educational thing does come up, I guess, a little bit from time to time in these things, and so I just kind of blush a little bit. But no, the combination of those experiences, I think, has been pretty. I think has been tremendously helpful, right? I mean, you look at like my experience at MIT. I mean, yeah, I actually never was a practicing chemical engineer, but like, you study engineering gives you a very strong analytical grounding, right? And that really never leaves you. My first job in management consulting at Bain, like they actually hire a lot of engineers because like, you're good at like thinking, problem solving, dimensionalizing.
Methodical.
Yeah. Dimensionalizing a problem. And certainly if you have a startup like ours, I mean, you're dimensionalizing shit all day, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of part and parcel of what you need to do. So I think that grounding was helpful. I mean, certainly the MBA was great as well. Timing really matters. And, I went to Harvard in 2008. Anybody who's our age will kind of remember what a tough year or a couple of years that was. And I think a lot of folks normally will go to HBS thinking that they're on their way to becoming, an investment banker or a hedge fund mogul or whatever, found that there weren't those kinds of opportunities. And so our class, the graduating class of 2010, has a lot of entrepreneurs in that class, right? People who kind of said, I'm gonna go like forge my own path and kind of write my own story, not to be super cliche about it, So a lot of it actually is even cohort driven. And so it's nice to have a peer group of friends, and they're some of my best friends in the world, right? Who are all, actually they're probably, many of them are much further along in the journey than I am. And so having that sounding board or that frame of reference as you kind of build a business is certainly really helpful too. So yeah, they've all contributed, I think, in pretty unique ways to how I, think about the business and think about the brand going forward.
Yeah.
And not to get too off topic, but since you brought up being a huge sports fan and a basketball fan, as well as a player as well, I happen to have, I don't know if you saw it earlier, but on my wall is not only a basketball player, but a basketball player who grew up in the Caribbean as well. Tim Duncan is on my wall because the San Antonio Spurs are my favorite team. So,
that's nice.
Yeah, there you go. So to bring things back on topic, I saw you give a talk a month or two back about launching a brand and adapting in crisis. You talked about graduating from Harvard Business School in 2010, coming out of the financial crisis. Now you're launching a business right before 2020, and this being your first year. But you touched on two kind of big questions 10 to 1 had to face in 2020. One was related to the pandemic, and the other question was really in response to the reckoning the country has had with racial injustice, inequality this year. And the question, as you put it, was, how do we find our voice and speak on social justice as a Black-owned brand? And I was thinking about this even more, when I was asking you earlier about if you felt like if you had kindred spirits. And, when you were talking about, your background, I was thinking ahead to this question already in terms of, there are so few Black-owned brands in spirits and in rum, especially. So can you give us a sense of sort of what actions that question led you to take and how it's impacted the way you think about 10 to 1 as a company and what you do with all that going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a great question. It's really critical to me. Again, let me kind of start at the end and say that what does success look like for me with this business? I mean, I want to have an exceptional product. I want people to enjoy drinking it. I want to sell tons of cases. So go buy the rum, whatever. But like ultimately, like for me, success is people, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, whenever it is, you'll see somebody point to that bottle and say, oh yeah, like 10 to 1, those guys, yeah, they changed the way that we thought about X, right? Like kind of fill in the blanks from there, right? Like Rum Reimagined isn't a tagline, right? It really is kind of it's a principle, it's an ethos. I want you to actually not just reimagine rum, but like broader culture, Caribbean culture. Like, what do those things kind of mean to you? And so that to me has to be very core to like the principles of the brand as you establish them from day one, and so coming back to sort of the crucibles of 2020 and all the civil rights reckonings around us, you're right. There aren't many of us out there. And by us, I mean, yes, I'm born in Trinidad, but my entire adult life has been here, right? Like I'm a young Black man who has experienced, many of the things that I think people are on the platform talking about today. And so in my view, it actually is quite clear, and I'm lucky to have a very supportive team in that vein. It just says like, it's not even, it's more than a right, it's a responsibility to actually stand up and sort of say something and figure out how you can lend your voice to that cause, right? Whether that's through sharing your own unique experiences or providing a platform for others, which we've done on a number of occasions to date, or figuring out how we can sort of weave some of that into, again, even just into sort of like the ethos of the brand, right? Like you mentioned some of the figures who we typically will showcase and celebrate and whatnot as part of Ten To One. All of those things to me are really kind of part of that desire to, lend a voice to that cause, There's this whole, and I think it's very interesting, building a brand in 2020 versus maybe 2010 and 2000, et cetera, where, you always say these arguments about I remember it was the presidential election, I think like 8 years ago with Mitt Romney, and there was a whole debate about like, are corporations people, right?
Right, yeah, I remember
it became
that.
a late night TV show punchline and all over the press and stuff. And he got panned a lot for the context in which he said that, because it was more economic in its nature, I think. But but for me, a brand like ours, damn right, this business is a person. It's people. Like, it has a soul. Like, we have a point of view. Like, we have to stand up and say stuff. So no, you can't ask me to dissociate my perspective from the brand that I'm creating. And by the way, if there's anything about that you dislike or you disagree with, then I mean, listen, by all means, feel free to, go drink something else. And I say that not at all in a combative way, right? Like, I'm a very sort of optimistic person by tone. And again, we're sort of all about the big tent principle. But I think part of that has to be, being willing to stand up for the things that you believe in. And again, supporting those who might need your help. And so, 10 to 1 has people behind it. Obviously, I'm the principal person as the founder of the brand, but there's 8, 9, 10 of us who are all kind of like marching to a similar beat and making sure that is core to how we show up as a brand every day.
I think it's interesting because so often I think people get kind of a little bit jaded to the idea. They hear terms like brand story and stuff like that, and they just immediately think that it's inauthentic. And sometimes, there's good reason for that because they've seen brands that are inauthentic, but it's really exciting to see more. I feel like we're seeing more brands that have a truly genuine story. Like, you're coming on this podcast and like, as you said, someone can ask like any detail about the brand and like, there's a reason behind it that's tied to something meaningful to you or your identity, culture. So I hope that's, what the impression listeners have listening to this is just, how much intention has gone into this. And I think it's really setting you up to be unique and do some very interesting stuff in rum in the coming years.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that, Will. So thank you for saying it. And you can't guarantee success in life with these things, but I do think that, like, telling a story as sort of earnestly and sort of objectively as you possibly can, hopefully goes a long way in kind of conjuring that sense of loyalty and appreciation from consumers whenever they come across the brand. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. So, Marc, we've run the gamut here in this interview. We've talked about basketball. We've talked about Trinidadian history, rum, obviously.
Rum categorizations.
Yeah. A tradition we have on this podcast, thanks to John, is a rapid fire question segment at the end of every episode, which is optional. If you are up for it, that's how we would love to end this podcast. And if that sounds like a fun thing to you, I'll let John tell you more about that now.
I'm signing up for the challenge, man. Let's do it.
Excellent. So the rapid fire segment is essentially we put 1 minute on the clock and we're going to ask a series of short, usually either this or that or very short answer questions. and for you to get to as many as you can within that 1 minute.
Okay.
So some of them are meant to be rum related and serious. Maybe a few might be a little silly, but we try to play it up and have fun with it so we can show the personality. And it's been a fun episode already so far, so I have a feeling I'm going to like this.
and knowing now that you are an athlete, Mark, I have a feeling that you're going to crush this.
Well, I was about to say, I'm very competitive. So I hope I'm not setting myself up for like failure. Like let's end this thing on a high note. But I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
All right. I have a minute on the clock. So, John, whenever you're ready.
All right. Neat or on the rocks?
Rocks.
Column, pot, or blend?
Oh, blend. Come on.
All right. Is the 4-digit code to unlock your phone the numbers 10 to 1?
It's not, but it should be.
I feel like that's a huge missed opportunity there.
It's a huge miss. A huge miss on the brand. Huge miss on the brand.
All right. Favorite person to share a bottle of rum with?
Damn, that's a tough one. Probably my dad.
Okay. Best secret off-menu drink to order at Starbucks?
Ooh, secret off-menu. Well, I mean, it was the unicorn. It was the unicorn for a hot second. Right. Maybe that's it. Yeah.
Anything with rum in it.
Yeah, if they have some hiding in the back. That's a naughty barista.
That's right. All right. Favorite rum not made in the Caribbean?
Ooh, Zacapa.
MIT, Cambridge, or Harvard, who has the best on-campus pub?
Oh, Cambridge.
All right. Is there a chance that 10 to 1 will ever attempt to make a 10 Caribbean country blend?
No.
Generally, people drink coffee in the morning and rum in the evening. At what hour of the day does one stop drinking coffee and start drinking rum?
I'd say 10 a.m.
Favorite rum cocktail?
Rum old fashioned.
And that's time.
All right.
How'd I do that?
Oh, yeah, you did great.
That was excellent. The only one I didn't get to was, did you have any super twin powers with your twin sister?
And the answer is yeah. At least we think so. that would have been the answer. We think so.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mark. That was fun, and the whole interview was fun and enlightening, and we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, and I'd encourage people to check out the 10 to 1 website. Obviously, we'll have a link to that in the show notes. Really well put together website. Lots of information about the products. And you guys make it pretty easy, I think, to order, which I'm guessing may have something to do with your prior experience. If I'm remembering correctly, I think you were involved with e-commerce at Starbucks. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. Ran e-commerce with Starbucks. So
there you go.
I know I have a couple of little tricks there. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah. Again, just to echo what John said, Mark, thanks so much for coming on, and I really look forward to watching 10 to 1 and where it goes from here.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Such a pleasure to chat with both of you guys. Appreciate the time, and thanks for letting me share a little bit of the story. Let me know when we're doing the basketball round 2 of the podcast, and I'll be back on to make it happen.
I thought we were going to record it during the Trinidad Festival when we come down there.
Oh, yeah, exactly. We can do it during Carnival. Let's kill 2 birds.
We'll do a post-Christmas. We'll break down all the Christmas Day games.
Yeah.
We'll do that. That sounds great.
Like that. Awesome.
All right. Thanks so much, Mark.
All righty.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Rumcast. Thank you to Marc Farrell, 10 to 1 Rum. Check out their website. It's in the show notes, along with links to anything else we discussed during the episode. As always, we would really appreciate it if you leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's always good to hear your thoughts on the podcast, and when you rate and review it, it helps other people find it, which we really appreciate. John, anything to add before we go?
Only thing is, we're really looking forward to the next episode. Will and I are going to do a year in review episode for us, and very excited about figuring out what that looks like. And so we're doing our homework on it and getting some categories together, maybe to talk about some things that we experienced this year and how, just generally speaking, what's been going on in the rum world and how we can kind of talk about that and look back at it to see what happened. So if there are any categories that you all might think of that you would want to hear us talk about in terms of exploring this 2020 year.
It's the only time we're going to look back on
it. Shoot us an email, host@rumcast.com, or get us on social media, Facebook or Instagram. We look forward to doing it.